On October 29, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610, a brand new Boeing 737 MAX 8, took off from Jakarta, Indonesia, at 6:20 a.m. local time, bound for Pangkal Pinang. The skies were clear, and everything seemed normal. But just 13 minutes later, the aircraft would plunge into the Java Sea, killing all 189 passengers and crew on board. Just after takeoff, the pilots noticed something was wrong. The nose of the plane began pitching downward, seemingly on its own. They pulled up. It happened again. The aircraft was fighting the pilots, forcing the nose down repeatedly. What they didn't know was that a new automated system inside the 737 MAX, known as MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, was actively pushing the plane downward, based on faulty sensor data. MCAS was never mentioned in their training. They had no idea how to turn it off. The pilots desperately fought for control, pulling back on the yoke each time the system forced them into a dive. The stick shaker, a warning system alerting them of an imminent stall, was blaring. Airspeed readings contradicted each other. Every second was chaos. At 6:32 a.m., the aircraft entered its final dive, accelerating to over 450 miles per hour. One last nose-down command from MCAS sealed their fate. The plane slammed into the Java Sea at full speed, disintegrating on impact. There were no survivors. Investigators quickly found the culprit: a faulty angle of attack, AOA sensor, which had fed incorrect data to MCAS, triggering an endless cycle of nose-down inputs. But then came the shocking discovery. MCAS was not part of the pilot's training manual. Boeing had never fully disclosed its existence. This was no isolated incident. Just 5 months later, on March 10, 2019, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, another 737 MAX, crashed under strikingly similar circumstances, killing 157 more people. The entire world took notice. Regulators grounded the 737 MAX globally, one of the largest aircraft groundings in aviation history. Airlines canceled orders. Boeing faced government investigations, lawsuits, and public outrage. Under intense scrutiny, Boeing admitted the MCAS system had been deeply flawed and that pilot training had been dangerously inadequate. A software fix was implemented, and after nearly 2 years, the 737 MAX was recertified for flight. Lion Air Flight 610 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 became a turning point in aviation safety, reminding the world that overconfidence in automation can be just as deadly as human error. On March 10, 2019, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, a brand new Boeing 737 MAX 8, lifted off from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, at 8:38 a.m. local time, bound for Nairobi, Kenya. The flight was supposed to last just over an hour. Instead, it would end in catastrophe just 6 minutes later, claiming the lives of 157 passengers and crew. From the moment the wheels left the ground, something was wrong. The stick shaker, a warning system that alerts pilots of an imminent stall, activated immediately. Conflicting airspeed and altitude readings flashed across the cockpit screens. The pilots were bombarded with warnings, just as the aircraft's nose suddenly pitched downward. The maneuvering characteristics, augmentation system, designed to prevent stalls, was receiving faulty data from a broken angle of attack sensor, the same issue that had doomed Lion Air 610. The pilots desperately pulled back to regain control, but just seconds later, MCAS struck again, forcing the plane downward. With each cycle, the plane dipped lower and lower, accelerating dangerously. The pilots tried everything, disabling power to the stabilizers, flipping switches, pulling back on the yoke with all their strength. But it wasn't enough. MCAS kept pushing. At 8:44 a.m., just 6 minutes after takeoff, Flight 302 entered its final dive. The plane slammed into the ground at nearly 700 miles per hour, carving a massive crater near the town of Bishoftu, Ethiopia. The impact was so violent, no bodies remained intact. There were no survivors. The aviation world was in shock. 2 crashes, 346 lives lost, and one undeniable truth: the 737 MAX was unsafe. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a devastating reality. Boeing had rushed the 737 MAX into production, cutting corners and downplaying the risks of MCAS. Pilots had never been trained on how to handle it. In fact, MCAS wasn't even mentioned in the flight manual. Under mounting pressure, the 737 MAX was grounded worldwide, an unprecedented move in modern aviation. Governments launched investigations, lawsuits followed. Boeing's reputation was in freefall, and billions of dollars were at stake. It took nearly 2 years of software fixes, flight tests, and recertifications before the 737 MAX was allowed to fly again. But for the families of the 346 victims, nothing could undo what had happened. The crashes of Lion Air Flight 610 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 weren't just accidents. They were failures of trust, engineering, and corporate accountability.